The New Orleans Saints may not be interested in making a change at quarterback at this time, but getting Taysom Hill involved is an absolute necessity if this team wants to win games. We got all of that and a little bit of lagniappe for you on today's episode of Locked On Saints.
You are Locked On Saints, your daily New Orleans Saints podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is good, Who Dat Nation and Who Dat family? Welcome into another episode of Locked On Saints, your daily podcast covering your favorite team, the New Orleans Saints, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thanks so much, as always, for making Locked On Saints your first listen of the day every day. Don't forget, we're free and available on all podcast apps and on YouTube as well. And I'm your host, Ross Jackson, at Ross Jackson Nola on Twitter, your New Orleans Saints expert, credential member of the media, CrescentCitySports.com, USA Today's Saints Wire, Tuesdays on Locked On NFL, and here with you every single Monday through Friday on Locked On Saints. Today's episode of Locked On Saints is brought to you by our friends over at Bet Online, where they've got more odds, lines, and props than ever before. Go and check them out, Bet Online, where the game starts. On today's episode, we're going to take a look at what the New Orleans Saints absolutely need. And there's sort of three different areas that we'll hit here. The first of which is going to be that the Saints need to get Taysom Hill more involved. The second of which that the New Orleans Saints are going to need more standout performances from their young guys, especially with some potential injuries on the way, or longer standing injuries on the way. And then finally, getting into the offseason, the New Orleans Saints absolutely need at least one first round pick in a potential Sean Payton trade. We're going to break all of that down today, but first of all, we'll start off with the New Orleans Saints needing to get Taysom Hill more involved. It's clear. It's just simply clear that Dennis Allen and the New Orleans Saints have no interest at this time in changing quarterbacks. Very likely you'll see Andy Dalton again against Pittsburgh. Now, if Andy Dalton struggles against Pittsburgh, then maybe that's a point in which the team will start to ask the same questions that we're asking in terms of the actual sort of value of having Andy Dalton out there, because I think the calming idea is being overplayed a little bit when you look at certain games, especially this past one. I also think that the touchdown scoring is one that's being gifted to Andy Dalton in his evaluation a bit, when you also have two games like the Seattle Seahawks game in which Taysom Hill absolutely went off and scored and single-handedly led the way for 4 different touchdowns. And then, of course, the Alvin Kamara game with 3 touchdowns in there. The only 3 touchdowns that were scored were mostly done with what happens when Alvin Kamara makes a choice and what happens when Alvin Kamara has the ball in his hand. So I think that maybe some of the scoring things, maybe some of the conversation around calming presence, all these other things are stuff that actually needs to be evaluated a little bit further in terms of just what we can take at surface value looking at the final scoreboard. But for the Saints, they don't want to upset anything at the moment, upset the apple cart, as Dennis Allen put it. They called the Baltimore Ravens game a bad day at work. So we'll let that be a bad day at work and and look to see if there's another against Pittsburgh. And then maybe the team looks to kind of reevaluate quarterback there. And just to be clear, I'm not specifically talking about reevaluating quarterback in terms of replacing Andy Dalton with Jameis Winston. You could replace Andy Dalton with Taysom Hill for all I care. You could take a look at You could take a look at your game plan with Andy Dalton and try to make adjustments with Andy Dalton so that quarterback. Something has to be done though, because right now you're not finishing in the red zone. And over the course of these past couple of games, you're not converting on third downs either. You look at the New Orleans Saints, who only converted 3 third downs, 27% against the Baltimore Ravens in this past game. And there's a glaring omission from third down plays in this Baltimore Ravens game, and it's Taysom Hill. The Saints ran 4 plays that were third down plays that needed 3 yards or less to go in terms of converting and picking up a first down. On those 4 plays, you had a 3rd and 1 run by Alvin Kamara to the left side, which was taken care of and cleaned up by Roquan Smith and Marlon Humphrey. Okay, you'll accept that. You put the ball in the hands of your best player, got him toward the outside. 3rd and 3, Andy Dalton throws his first read to Juwan Johnson, 2 yards shy at the line of scrimmage, basically, but still 2 yards shy of that first down. He ends up getting tackled. You punt. A 3rd and 1, Andy Dalton scrambles, not really scrambles, it was more of a QB sneak that was in that sort of 2-minute drill at the end of the first half where that possession still came up empty in terms of touchdowns. Still got a field goal out of it though, so we won't take that away. And then Andy Dalton completed a pass to Alvin Kamara, 19 yards. So you'll notice that and that was on another 3rd and 1 in the fourth quarter. So what you'll notice though is that there's no Taysom Hill in there. In fact, Andy Dalton. You had a penalty on Justin Houston. Andy Dalton. So Andy Dalton was sacked more times, twice, on third downs than Taysom Hill touched the ball on third downs, i.e. Taysom Hill did not touch the ball on third downs, is what I'm getting at. Sorry. It took me a long time to get there, but I got there. Okay, so the problem with that is that when you look at where Taysom Hill has been kind of most valuable, 3rd and 1 is absolutely that place. Taysom Hill has touched the ball 7 times on third downs, 6 of which he's been able to convert for first downs. All 6 of those third down touches have been 3rd and 1. There was only one exception, which I believe was like a 3rd and 3, where he didn't get there. He ended up being tackled behind the line of scrimmage for like -2 yards. So that one didn't work out. But 6 of 7, pretty dang good, especially when you're in a situation here where you're not converting those third downs. Curiously, you look at the utilization of Taysom Hill against Baltimore, and it didn't make any sense. Look at this. Taysom Hill touches the ball more than 5 times in a game, 403.5 yards per game, 29.2 points per game. Taysom Hill touches the ball 4 or fewer times in a game, 325 yards per game. So that's about nearly an 80-yard drop-off. And then only 12.3 points per game. Those are several touchdowns off the board in that case. Now, part of the reason that the scoring has been so high, like we discussed over the course of the past couple of weeks, are because of the play of guys like Taysom Hill and Alvin Kamara, what they can do with the ball in their hands. Dalton also threw 4 touchdowns in a game, yes, but he also surrendered 2 pick sixes and then has had trouble in the red zone, which is another place that Taysom Hill packs some value for you, as well as Alvin Kamara. So if you're going to stick with Andy Dalton, at least find a way to work Taysom Hill more into the game plan. Have him touching the ball 5 or more times. That's with a rush, with a reception, of which, by the way, he's only got 5 targets on the season so far. Or even if you have him throwing passes against Arizona, he threw, 2 passes for 48 yards in that game. So you think about the games where Taysom has had the biggest impact. Atlanta, right? The 2 big runs that ended up on the second drive of the game that ended up getting that offense going after it sputtered out to open up the series, or to open up that game in their first series. Seattle, where he was accounted for 4 different touchdowns. Las Vegas, where he ran for several yards, continued to pick up first downs, helped them to continuously convert on third downs. And then your outlier there would be that Arizona game that we talked about, where he caught a screen pass for a touchdown, ran a few times, didn't have a lot of yards there, but then also had those 2 passes for 48 yards. When I call that one the outlier, it's because that's the only game of those 4 in which Taysom Hill has had a massive impact where the Saints actually lost. The other 3 games, Atlanta, Seattle, Las Vegas, you won. And you won mostly on the back of either Taysom Hill or Alvin Kamara. Alvin Kamara totaled for 62 total yards in this game against the Baltimore Ravens in their loss, but you didn't get Taysom Hill involved. You might say, oh, well, those are bad defenses, Atlanta, Seattle, Las Vegas. And you're not wrong there, but if you're the New Orleans Saints team and you're saying, well, we're trying to get him more involved, trust me, we want to get him more involved, but then be afraid to get him involved against a good defense, you can't have both. And when I say afraid to get him involved against a good defense, yeah, they ran some RPO stuff with him and some read option stuff with him in terms of forcing him to hand the ball off, which is something that most defenses haven't been able to do. But we talk about that unstoppable QB power run. They didn't run one. They never ran it. And they had several options and several opportunities to run it. We were just talking about 4 different 3rd and shorts, 4 different 3rd and 3 or less to go situations. And some of those did not get converted. The third down utilization of Taysom Hill is one part. You have the red zone utilization of Taysom Hill as another part. And then you also simply just have the energy that comes with utilizing Taysom Hill. So if you're not going to make a change at quarterback, which is whatever at this point, right? If you're not going to make a change at quarterback, if you're going to roll with Andy Dalton, you have to be willing to put the ball in the hands of people that put points on the board. Because right now, Andy Dalton, outside of one game, which was that Arizona Cardinals game, isn't doing that. He's not doing it. And I know that we talk about, Andy Dalton scoring touchdowns, and that's one of the reasons why, they're keeping him out there is because he's putting points on the board. He threw a touchdown against Minnesota, threw 1 touchdown against Seattle, threw 1 touchdown against Cincinnati. He had the 4 touchdowns against Arizona, which we just talked about, the 2 touchdowns against Las Vegas, which were putting the ball in the hands of your playmaker and letting him do the rest. And then the 1 touchdown at the end of the Baltimore game, which was an individual effort by Juwan Johnson and absolutely no effort from Chuck Clark to just let him walk into the end zone. who's really putting the points on the board in the New Orleans Saints offense? I think that's the question that the New Orleans Saints need to answer and adjust to. All right, as we continue on with what the Saints need today, let's move on here. The New Orleans Saints need some big-time performances from young players, both the offensive and defensive side, at some critical positions, with Pete Werner and Eric McCoy currently injured and no timetables set for their return just yet. We have to speculate that they're probably going to be out for a little while. So how do the New Orleans Saints handle that? Well, a good performance from Alontae Taylor gives you a lot of hope. He's done it 3 weeks in a row. And another stellar performance from Cesar Ruiz helps out a lot too. We're going to break down some stuff for our Analytics Tuesday for the young players that need to stand up for the New Orleans Saints. But first, I'm going to tell you what you need. You need Simply Safe. I've thought, if you've made any thoughts at all about securing your home with home security, or you've been putting it off or whatever, I want you to listen up. Because right now, Locked On Saints listeners are going to be able to get the number 1 rated Simply Safe home security system for, listen here, 50% off, 50, half off. That's the biggest offer of the year. So if you're somebody that's looking for that and you want to have that emergency 24/7 monitoring agents that are going to use that Fast Protect technology exclusive to only Simply Safe to capture critical evidence to verify if a threat is real, as well as make sure that you get your first priority response, you'll want to check out Simply Safe today. Don't miss your chance to save big on the only security system, home security system that I'll recommend. Get 50% off of any new Simply Safe system at simplysafe.com/lockedonnfl today. It's their biggest discount of the year, so don't wait. That's simplysafe.com/lockedonnfl. There's no safe like Simply Safe. All right, family, continuing on with today's episode of Locked On Saints with some more injuries piling up for the New Orleans Saints and an undisclosed timetable. I think it's time to discuss what the New Orleans Saints need from some of their young players who might get an opportunity to step up here over the course of the next couple of weeks. Thanks so much, as always, making Locked On Saints your first listen of the day today. Don't forget, for your second listen, to go and check out Locked On Sports Today, from all the games that matter to highlighting the biggest stories in sports. You get to go beyond the scoreboard and behind the scenes with the local experts in a way that only the Locked On podcast can provide. Locked On Sports Today, available on this app, YouTube, or wherever you get your podcasts. Okay, so Pete Werner suffered an injury. Marcus Davenport suffered an injury. And Eric McCoy suffered an injury. Couldn't get Jarvis Landry back out on the field in this game against Baltimore. There's a lot of encouragement. There's a lot of optimism about the potential of him returning against Pittsburgh. We'll see, though, right? We know how this goes. And then the return of Marshawn Lattimore is one that's still very much up in the air. Dennis Allen told us during his conference call yesterday, or on Tuesday, that things are getting better, but, you know, it's a hard injury to come back from. We know he's dealing with some kind of like internal something or another, whether it be liver or something, I don't know, but or kidney or whatever it is. But, you know, he took a pretty bad hit to the gut during that Seattle game, and he's been out ever since. So based upon what we've seen from the New Orleans Saints so far this season, I think it's understandable and acceptable to assume that Pete Werner is going to miss some time. He got carted off from the injury tent. I think that's a pretty significant detail there. Eric McCoy might miss some time. He went back to the locker room after he was injured as well. So for the Saints, that's 2 big time spots where you're going to have, you're going to be attacked in both of those spots. On the interior, without your kind of stalwart cornerstone on your offensive line, in the middle of your defense, which has been so strong so far this season and probably the most consistent level of play from your defense so far. But I will say this. There are players that stepped up well into those spots. Kaden Elliss, I thought, played very well. Let me not say very well, but played very well in some aspects, and there were other aspects where you wanted to see him wanted to see a little bit better from him. That's the same that Dennis Allen told us as well. But I thought in particular he played well in coverage. And I also thought in particular that he reacted well to the mobile quarterback in Lamar Jackson. He was credited with a sack in this one on a rep in which he was effectively covering someone out of the backfield. That person never came out of the backfield because they kind of went into a max protect situation. So Kaden Elliss just kind of flowed with the play. And then once he saw Lamar Jackson commit to the run, picked the right angle, closed him off, got him out of bounds, and made the tackle over on the sideline. It was no gain, so it was credited as a sack. So good stuff from Kaden Elliss there. At the same time, you also had really good stuff from your protection, even without Eric McCoy, who was struggling actually early on in the game. But once Cesar Ruiz bounced over to Eric McCoy's spot, I thought he played really well, gave up 2 pressures, both of which simply hurries. Not that much of a big deal. You know, you look at the fact that he played 36 different snaps in terms of like pass blocking, then that makes a little bit of sense, right? You can see that that's a very small percentage. You look at Eric McCoy, however, he played only 10 snaps, gave up 2 pressures himself, 1 hit, 1 hurry. So he was struggling a little bit early. Now he had the injury. So you had Cesar Ruiz jump in at center and perform well, but Calvin Throckmorton, who played 26 snaps at right guard, gave up 4 total pressures, including 3 hurries and a sack. So that's one of those players that's going to have to step up and perform better, particularly in pass protection. Andy Dalton did not handle pressure well. He's got good stats against pressure, right? He had a perfect passer rating against the blitz. He had a very nice passer rating as well when he was pressured. He had a better passer rating when he was pressured than he had when he wasn't under pressure, but that's inflated quite a bit by a 41-yard touchdown to Juwan Johnson, where again, individual effort by Juwan Johnson and then just giving up on the play if you're Chuck Clark, the Baltimore safety. So it's inflated those numbers in terms of pressure. Outside of that, he struggled there. I mean, and some of it wasn't that he was throwing a lot of incomplete passes. I think he completed 8 out of 11 passes under pressure. That's pretty good. But it was quick pass to the outside, quick pass to the outside, quick pass to the outside. Everything was at the line of scrimmage, and it was kind of panic mode, get the ball out, get the ball out, get the ball out. Alontae Taylor had another really good game. Gave up the most receptions that we've seen him give up in a game so far, but kept everything in front of him, made tackles right at the catch point, only allowed 4 yards after catch, total of 36 yards on 3 catches, but only one of those went for a first down. He was targeted 8 times and allowed only 3 receptions. That included a pass breakup as well. So you saw more really good stuff from Alontae Taylor, which is exactly what it is that you were looking for. I want to look at his forced incompletion stuff as well. So he had the 1 forced incompletion, so that counts as 13%. The 1 pass breakup, 52.1 NFL passer rating when targeted. So that's really, really good. So, and you'll want to see that in the passing game as well as in the run game too. So those are some of the guys that are going to have to stand up. And another one's going to be Payton Turner. And Payton Turner didn't have like a bad game at all. He got wrecked by a running back at one point coming out of the backfield. He was locked up with a tackle, and then a running back came and kind of like blew him up a little bit, but it wasn't like he was one-on-one with the running back, so we don't hold it against him like too much. But that's probably like one of the plays that you've seen circulating around online and everything like that on social media, blah, blah, blah. But for the most part, in terms of his performance, it was a positive performance. He only had 1 pressure, but again, he only played 11 pass rushing snaps, but he also made some really nice plays in the run game as well, and had a really nice play in terms of limiting Lamar Jackson around the edge in a couple of times. So I think that his sort of combination of length, speed, agility is something that matches up well with these mobile quarterbacks. And so if Marcus Davenport is going to miss out, then you're going to want to see Payton Turner be that other guy that steps up and makes some good plays, not only in the pass rush, but also ideally in the run game as well. He had 2 different run stops, so he had a 13.3 run stop percentage, considering he only played 15 run stop snaps. So pretty good there. So a good game from Payton Turner, a good game from Alontae Taylor, some nice stuff from Kaden Elliss, some nice stuff from Zach Bond as well, and some nice stuff from Cesar Ruiz. You're going to want to see that continuing on, especially if the New Orleans Saints are going to be without Pete Werner, Marcus Davenport, and Eric McCoy for any amount of games. It could be 1 game, it could be 2 games, especially next week too. If you don't have Eric McCoy, but TJ Watt is returning for the Pittsburgh Steelers, you're going to want your best 5 that you can get out there on the offensive line. So you want to see Calvin Throckmorton step up in that category. You want to see Cesar Ruiz continue to perform well at center in that situation. So we'll see. But that's absolutely one of those needs for the New Orleans Saints as the season continues on. All right, family, coming up next, we're going to jump into the future. What is it that the New Orleans Saints need this offseason? Well, it's a first-round pick when it comes to Sean Payton returning to coach. You hope that they're going to be able to get that done this offseason. Why is that first-round pick so important? We'll discuss as we continue on with today's episode of Locked On Saints. Today's episode of Locked On Saints is brought to you by Blue Nile, the original online jeweler. Blue Nile offers the largest selection of independently graded diamonds at prices that are significantly below your traditional retailers. You can shop from the comfort of your own home, shop safely with Blue Nile as well, as they'll get everything taken care of, and If you have those moments that you want to make sparkle, like a proposal, you need a custom engagement ring, you're looking for a tennis bracelet for a family member or a friend, or you're looking for some diamond-studded earrings for Christmas presents, things like that, Blue Nile has everything that you need. They've also got 24/7 jewelry experts on hand ready to help you all day, all night to make sure that you find the most memorable gift at every budget. So it'll get you all taken care of. You can shop stress-free over at Blue Nile. They've got a 100% satisfaction guarantee. And of course, all Blue Nile orders are insured. They ship free and in discreet packaging as to not mess up the surprise that's inside, not to give anything away. So make your moment sparkle at Blue Nile today. Go to BlueNile.com and use promo code LOCKEDON to save $50 on your purchase of $500 or more. That's BLUENILE.com/LOCKEDON to save $50 on your purchase of $500 or more. BlueNile.com, promo code LOCKEDON. Let's get it, Who Dat Nation. Wrapping up today's episode of Locked On Saints. Take a look at how the New Orleans Saints are in need of three different things today. We spoke about needing to get Taysom Hill involved, needing to get that really nice play from your young guys, some guys that need to step up and improve, some guys that just kind of need to keep doing what they're doing, like Alontae Taylor and Kaden Elliss and others. Cesar Ruiz, who's taken some massive steps forward so far this season, now also moving back to his more natural position at center. But they also need something in the future. And I think they're going to need it this offseason, and that is getting a first-round pick back for Sean Payton returning to coaching. So whether Sean Payton goes back to coaching for, let's say, the Dallas Cowboys or the Indianapolis Colts have kind of entered the chat now with all their curious decisions over in Indy. Although if I'm Sean and I'm looking at Indianapolis and what they just did to Frank Reich, I'm like, nah, I'm good. I'm not about that. The Los Angeles Chargers should absolutely be an option, as well as some other teams out there that could be surprise teams, like I don't know, Kansas City could be a surprise team depending upon what happens there. So there are some, and I'm just looking at like a Bruce Arians type situation where a coach retires in the offseason and then bam, some team pops up. So if you're the New Orleans Saints, what you're really looking at here is what can you get back for Sean Payton? Most of the time when you're discussing that, you're talking about, and kind of the baseline that's used is the John Gruden trade from the Raiders to the Bucks. 2 firsts, 2 seconds. So basically like this year's first and second, next year's first and second. And then it was like $8 million in cash consideration, which kind of helps to offset contract buyout, not even buyout, but contract language, stuff like that. So for the Saints, that's kind of the baseline. And in my opinion, you need at least a 2023 first rounder. If you get a 2023 first rounder, 2023 second rounder, and a 2024 second rounder and some cash stuff, great. If you don't get the 2 firsts, but you get the 2 seconds and you get a first this year, great. I think you need that. I think it's something that the New Orleans Saints are absolutely in need of. And the reason why is because the future quarterback for this team is not in the building. Andy Dalton's not your future, right? By any stretch of the imagination, based upon where he is in his playing career. Taysom Hill's 30 years old. Jameis Winston's young, but if Jameis Winston doesn't hit the field for the rest of the season, why would he come back to New Orleans next year? So when I look at where, especially knowing that the decision to start Andy Dalton over Jameis Winston was performance-based, it was offensive. It was an offensive decision publicly, is what Dennis Allen said. If I'm Jameis Winston, I'm going somewhere else, right? I'm going to go try my luck somewhere else. So for me, when I look at this team, the team has to start now kind of rotating through, taking those shots in the draft, trying to bring in free agents. They've got to now do the find your next quarterback search because that guy's not on the roster right now. So you think about some of the names that are out there, of course, and this is why the first round pick, getting it back for Sean Payton, is so important because the Saints right now would finish the season with the 6th overall selection, which is great, but they don't own it. It's the Philadelphia Eagles as a part of that draft trade to get the 2nd first round pick. They moved basically their first round pick from next year into this year and drafted, Trevor Penning, and then they moved up to get Chris Olave, all of that. Which weren't bad moves. I think those were the things that they felt like they needed to do to compete this season. The offseason moves that the New Orleans Saints made this offseason were about competing in 2022, but you also expected that the health was going to be better. You thought that the quarterback play was going to be better. You thought that the coaching was going to be better. You thought that things were going to be better. And then you got into the season, injuries happen, complications happen, things aren't going as well as you thought that they would go. Like, that's just where they are. So I don't blame them for any of the offseason moves, but now as they look ahead to next offseason, they've got to figure out what those moves are, and one of which should be taking a swing in the draft at a quarterback. So you look at the quarterbacks that are going to be available in this year's upcoming draft. And yeah, of course, you've got Alabama's Bryce Young. You've got Ohio State's CJ Stroud. Those guys are kind of the consensus number one, number two when it comes to quarterback. I think eventually you're going to see Hendon Hooker jump into that if he hasn't already. But you know how draft process goes, right? There's always some mystery name, or there's a name that no one was talking about before the season began that jumps into the first round and then becomes a first round quarterback, except for, of course, last year's first, quarterback class, which was not a very good quarterback class. This is a much better one. So you've got guys like Hendon Hooker that could potentially be had in the second round, maybe, but I think he'll be a first round quarterback. So that's one of the reasons why I think you have to get a first round pick here. Anthony Richardson, the quarterback from the Florida Gators. He's somebody that could be a late first round selection, early second round selection. So those are the types of players that the Saints are going to have to start taking swings on. So you look at them. You also look at BYU's Jaron Hall. You look at Wake Forest Sam Hartman. You look at Washington State's Cameron Ward. There are a lot of options for the Saints to take some swings at. So if you can get a first round pick back, you can utilize that at another position if the top three quarterbacks are off the board, which in my opinion at this point are going to be Bryce Young, CJ Stroud, and then Hendon Hooker. If those guys are off the board by the time that you get to that first round selection, then yeah, you go to another position, and then in the second round, maybe you can take a swing at a quarterback there, or you take a swing at that quarterback anyway, and you get the first round option, or you get the fifth year option in the first round. That way, I don't think there's anything wrong with either of those because you're probably going to be picking pretty high in the second round at this point anyway. So for me, the first round pick is what the New Orleans Saints absolutely need for this coming season, this coming draft in that Sean Payton trade. And maybe you get aggressive with that. Maybe you trade that first round pick and next year's first round pick to jump up, get up earlier in the draft and get one of those top three quarterbacks. Sure. As long as you're trading the two first for a quarterback, these are the swings that the Saints are going to have to start taking. When you're having to replace a franchise quarterback, these are the things that you have to do. So be prepared. This is what the New Orleans Saints future looks like at the moment, but it's not fully grim, right? 2023's quarterback class is good. 2024's quarterback class is good. There are a lot of good college quarterbacks coming out that the Saints could invest in. Now, can they develop a drafted quarterback, which isn't something we've seen them do so far, really, in the modern day run of this, or modern day era of this team? That's a question that we'll have to see. That's a question that will have to be answered. So, but it all starts with getting a quarterback. And right now, the Saints are not in position to find their future at quarterback with what's in the building. So draft capital. Draft capital becomes the much more important part of the New Orleans Saints future at this point. All right, y'all. I appreciate you as always making Locked On Saints your first listen of the day. Coming up in tomorrow's episode, crossover Thursday, with myself and Locked On Steelers host Christopher Carter, getting you all ready for everything you need to know about the upcoming Saints and Steelers matchup. Probably have an extra episode for you on Thursday as well, keeping you up to date with everything that goes on later on in the afternoon around practice and all the other things that we're watching, those injuries, all that. And then Friday, of course, is our game plan. How do you beat the Pittsburgh Steelers? What do the New Orleans Saints have to do to get a win this weekend? So we're going to be breaking it all down for the rest of the week. Make sure you're also going and checking out the Locked On Sports Today podcast. Make sure you're getting all of the news around the biggest games, highlights, or highlight moments, breakdowns of some of the most important stuff going on around sports. And of course, the take of the day, you can find it on the Odyssey app, YouTube, or wherever you get your podcast. I appreciate you, as always, making Locked On Saints a part of your day and a part of your routine, for saying yes to me and the show. As always, if you see me, say hi. And if you need anything else around your New Orleans Saints in between these episodes, make sure you follow me on Twitter at Ross Jackson, NOLA. Hit me up. Let me know how the family's doing. Let me know how you living. Let me know how you momming them. And trust you, that nation. I'll holla at you.